All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to our webinar on optimizing utility operations through the use of the AWWA Utility Management Standards. Management standards were developed to help utilities to foster excellence through continuous improvement and evaluation. These voluntary standards and the associated guidebooks allow utilities to identify gaps in their management systems and to improve systems before they fail. Case studies have shown that the use of the standards can help utilities save energy, improve efficiency, prevent water loss, and improve water quality. They have also been used successfully to justify investments and secure funding. Today's webinar focuses on the G300 standard for source water protection. This is the third in a series of 3 webinars which involve a detailed review of the utility management standards and self-assessment guidebooks. If you think of any questions during the webinar, please type them into the chat area of your screen, and we will go over them at the end of the presentations. Our first speaker today is Eva Niemitzki, who will give us a brief introduction and overview of the utility management standards. Many of you know Eva, who works for the Utah Department of Environmental Quality, where she provides technical assistance to water treatment plant managers and operators and conducts research projects on water quality and treatment. She has organized the Utah Water Quality Alliance that created a venue for cooperation between the utilities and a direct application of project findings to improve water treatment plant performance. She has directed several studies on treatability of emerging contaminants and feasibility of new treatment technologies. Eva received her PhD in environmental engineering from Utah State University and also serves there as an associate professor. So Eva, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you all for listening and watching. I hope you can hear me well. This webinar is a third part of a series titled Optimizing Utility Operations Through the Use of AWWA Utility Management Standards. A series that is dedicated to state agency staff who are seeking tools and material to effectively help water utilities to optimize their operations. These webinars describe voluntary standards that have been developed by AWWA volunteers in several areas of utility operations, starting from source water protection, going to treatment and distribution system management, to customer service, emergency preparedness, water conservation, and many others. It's important to stress out that these standards are voluntary, but they serve utilities in conducting self-assessments of their selected operations. They help pointing out priorities leading to better operations. I believe that regulatory agencies could provide valuable guidance to utilities by promoting the use of these standards and helping out with using them as operational tools. There are several common threads that link these utility management standards. Other than the same format and non-regulatory set of optimization processes, these standards are written for the operators. These standards should be achievable by a well-operated utility without having to undergo any special investments. In other words, a well-run utility of any size should pass a self-assessment against any of the standards with only minor recommendations that help their continuing improvements. These standards are not written for the best in class. A utility that checks its operation against the standards could also request another utility or a regulatory agency to perform a peer review of their self-assessment in a non-threatening way, called technical assistance, as these standards are non-regulatory and they're above regulatory requirements. Utilities that conduct assessments and peer reviews can expect measurable improvements of utilities operations, since the self-assessments result in development of measurable goals, activities, and projects, leading to better operations and thus better public health protection. There's a committee within AWWA named Utility Quality Management Committee, and it's composed of utility operators and managers, consulting engineering firms, engineers and scientists, and state and provincial regulators. They worked for over a decade to bring together a group of experts and to give them guidance on how to construct standards that would serve in several areas of utility functioning. These groups of authors of individual standards, they're well known in the drinking water industry as highly published, recognized in their respective areas and expertise, and these folks provided their time and expertise as volunteers in AWWA. So all these standards developed so far in various areas of operation are constructed in the same format, guiding the reader through a set of items to be considered in a self-assessment. As I mentioned earlier, these elements, those items to be evaluated, are set slightly above existing regulations. For example, they indicate needs to develop standard operating procedures in some areas or conduct periodic checks in some specific areas. The standards are ANSI certified. They are reviewed every 5 years. They live in a family of well-known AWWA standards, and they're grouped with a designation of a G series standard. But they're still very little known, little advertised, since they're non-regulatory and not required. They are probably sitting on shelves of all utilities that are members of AWWA, and those utilities receive all AWWA standards as one of the benefits of their membership. So far, 4 of those standards have also guidebooks that help in performing a self-assessment, and those guidebooks have to be purchased separately. Here is a full list of the utility management standards developed in AWWA. The left-hand side shows drinking water standards, with the first 4 on that list also having individual guidebooks available for purchase. The right-hand side shows the standards developed for wastewater utilities, with the last 4 written in italics that are still in a development stage. So as you look at this list, glance through it, you can see that these standards cover most, if not all, of the utility operations. We're hoping that by helping you being familiar with the utility management standards, you would be willing to provide information about them, promote their use in the utilities in your state. And you would be willing to assist your utilities in using these standards and performing individual self-assessments. Back in January and then in March, we presented the first 2 standards dedicated to treatment and distribution. And these presentations are available on ASWA's website for those who want to see it. We're dedicating this webcast to the 3rd of the standards in the G-Series family, the Source Water Protection Standards, also known as a G300 standard. I wanted to share a few testimonials with you, since so far several water utilities in the U.S. have conducted self-assessments against several of the utility management standards. Some of the comments that were shared with the Utility Quality Management Committee stated that applying these standards to utility operations help to manage utilities in a way which guarantees peace of mind. Well, that's a big statement. Other testimonials say that using the standards in optimizing operations assures continuity in optimization efforts, encourages development of standard operating procedures, and having those SOPs in place allows new, young operators possess knowledge that otherwise would be lost once older and more experienced operators retire. And finally, having and using a set of standards helps maintaining safe performance based on a set of good practices and not just good luck, allowing operators, managers, as well as regulators to have peace of mind and sleep well at night. So, to be in agreement with the multi-barrier approach to public health protection, we picked the 3 standards that serve optimization of the 3 barriers. And as I said earlier, we presented webcasts on treatment and distribution that are available for viewing on ASWA's website, leaving source water protection for today. Since we're all concerned about industrial spills to water bodies, about floods and droughts, and lately harmful algal blooms that produce cyanotoxins, this webinar introducing a management tool that allows for a proactive approach to these challenges. So the rest of this webcast will focus on source water protection standards, and Chi-Ho Sham, who is the Vice President and Chief Scientist of the Eastern Research Group in Massachusetts in Lexington, he dedicated a big chunk of his career to source water protection, including working with the group that developed the G300 and a corresponding guidance manual. So now I wanted to let him walk you through the standards. Thank you so much for listening, and back to you, Dave.
Okay, well, thank you, Eva. As Eva mentioned, our next speaker is Chi-Ho Sham, who will take us through the G300 standard for source water protection and the benefits that it has provided to utilities. Chi-Ho is Chief Scientist and Vice President of ERG, in its Drinking Water and Water Quality Division. And Chi-Ho has a long and distinguished career as an environmental consultant with a focus on drinking water, source water protection, and underground injection control. And as many of you know, Chi-Ho is an active member and volunteer in AWWA, and they named him Volunteer of the Year last summer in 2016. And Chi-Ho also serves as a professor in the Department of International Development, Community and Environment at Clark University. So Chi-Ho, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you, Dave, and thank you, Eva, for giving us a very good and comprehensive the descriptions of what the G series is all about. So I want to today going to focus on the third of the series, the G300, and that will be on source water protection. So even in the early day, back in like 1610, the governor of Virginia had made some proclamation indicating that people shouldn't be washing the dishes or rinsing any kind of kettle, pots, and pans, and doing any kind of business around the old well in a new pump within about 20 feet. So in the early days, they already understand that there is probably a link between waste and drinking water, that if you contaminate drinking water, you will basically have to suffer the consequences. So that's back in 1610. After all these years, we still are carrying that notion that we shouldn't be contaminating our drinking water supply sources, because after you contaminating it, it will take a lot of energy, a lot of resource to clean it up. Now, but in recent years, we still have a lot of these incidents. And for example, on this particular slide, you can see 3 of the examples. These are all back in 2014, a little bit dated, but I mean, we can easily update that information on an annual basis. Most of us remember the Elk River spill back in January 2014 in West Virginia. And then we also know about the cyanobacteria, cyanotoxin contamination scare in Toledo. And actually, one of the last slides that Eva shown was basically indicating the harmful algal bloom. And of course, we all know that the cyanobacteria, they indeed are bacteria, but certain cyanobacteria can generate toxins such as mycocystin, which is the toxin of concern in Toledo. And then the one more on this particular slide indicating that mine tailing spill back in also 2014 in British Columbia of Canada, that also have caused some drinking water and water quality problem. Now, if you go back to just 2016, not just last year, there are a number of these events. It's equivalent to the Elk River chemical spill. We see a number of crude oil pipeline spill in North Dakota and also in other states. And then also for the cyanobacteria, cyanotoxin issue, we see that happen again in Lake Erie, down in around the St. Louis area, in Utah, in Florida, in Idaho, in California. So there are quite a few of these incidents across the country in 2016. And right now, of course, we're still in the winter month. Well, now hopefully going into the spring, we'll see how 2017 will fare with regarding to cyanobacteria, cyanotoxin. And then the last one, we all remember in 2015, the Gold King mine spill in the state of Colorado. So we definitely still have some challenges associated with our source water, understanding that engineers can do a lot, but again, if we end up contaminating our source water, we increase the threat to our public health and also increase the resources that we will need to treat our drinking water. So what is exactly source water protection? This is a very simple definition. As you can read in the first part, source water protection involves the maintenance, the safeguarding, and or improving the quality of a water source that can be used as a supply for drinking water. And that source could be surface water such as river, stream, reservoir, and lake, or it can also be groundwater that you can be pumping from a shallow superficial aquifer or coming from a very deep aquifer. And these are all considered to be the supply sources of our drinking water. Well, regarding to the protection program, these are the program that ideally we will use it to identify, to help prioritize, to implement and evaluate specific activity and management practices that can contribute to the achievement of this goal, which is the protection of our source water. So one of the things that we also had noted is that source water protection is a highly site-specific process, that mainly because we are looking at, in a particular location, the ecology could be very different, the geology, the geography, the history of the development of a site could all be very different from one place to another. And so in that case, to protect that source water will be very unique in terms of the approach that you will take. So there really, in a sense, is that no two source water protection programs are completely alike. So what we will look at is that they do share some common element, as you can see in the second bullet of the slide, that they vary a lot, but by and large, if you look at some of the successful programs, they share quite a few of these common fundamental elements, and that's basically the focus of this particular presentation. So what is the rationale for today's presentation is to allow the audience to gain a better understanding of the G300 standard on source water protection developed by the American Water Works Association, and also allowing us to look at the entire series of approach that going all the way from source to tap by taking into account the other two presentations that was done earlier on treatment and also on distribution system. So that truly will be the multiple barrier approach in protecting public health and our drinking water. So the objective for today's presentation is that after this presentation, you should be able to understand what exactly are these essential elements of a source water protection program. We'll try to keep it relatively simple and allowing you to use it as a framework to develop a source water protection program, and then in that case really identify what are these elements and how you can accomplish to fulfill the objective of these various different elements. And also another objective is that you'll be able to identify opportunity and challenges to protect your source water. And in that case, by combining these information, you'll be able to incorporate them into a source water protection program. So the agenda is relatively straightforward. We're going to just have a quick overview of the AWWA Utility Management Standard for Source Water Protection. And we're going to go over the 6 essential elements of the source water protection standard that can be used to implement a source water protection program. And then also we'll take a look at the some of the worksheet in the operational guide that Eva and Dave have talked about earlier on. So the source water protection standard was developed by the Standard Council, one of the 6 councils of the American Water Works Association, that is basically put together to support the missions of the association. So the Standard Council, as Eva and David have talked about early on, they are in charge of developing the various different standards. These are voluntary in nature, and what they are supposed to do is to help water utility to do and improve the performance. So in 2007, American Water Works Association approved and published the first edition of the G300 standard, and that standard came into effectiveness on July 1st, 2007. And then subsequently, that standard was updated in 2014. So the second edition of the G300 standard was approved and was published, and it was effective as of June 1st, 2014. The standard generally will go through a 5-year cycle, so you probably will be seeing another edition coming out in the year 2019 or 2020, in around that ballpark, to make sure that the standard is up to date, the references to it have been kept up, and also if there's any changes or modification, these changes and modification will be reflected in the new standard. And subsequent to the publication of the first edition of the standard, the Technical Educational Council, which is another one of the council of the 6th Council of AWWA, was tasked to put together a operational guidebook. In a sense, is that you can think about this as like the guidance document to do the actual implementations of the source water protection standard. And this particular guidebook started off in 2009, and it was completed and published in May of 2010. Currently, this particular guidebook is under revision. Dr. Rich Garlick, Ravenna Water Authority, is actually the key author right now to update this guidebook to reflect the changes to the standard back in 2014. So what exactly is in this standard? Well, the scope of the standard is to describe the essential elements of the effective protection of source water. And the purpose of the standard is to define these minimum program requirements for the protection of source water. And for the application, it's referenced in the evaluation of source water protection for recognition. And there is an award that was given out every year. It's called the AWWA Exemplary Source Water Protection Award. And pretty much the award evaluation criteria follow in line of the 6th element that is depicted in the standard. And also, if folks would require help to understand what these elements in more detail, the guidebook can be used to actually help in guiding a utility to put together a nominations to be submitted to AWWA to be evaluated and hopefully recognized to be one of the award winners. So I've been talking about that this particular standard have the 6 elements, and here this is a simple bullet points of the 6 elements. So the first element is to make sure that for utility they need to have a source water protection program vision. And without a vision, we tend to get lost. So what this will do is to make sure that that information is shared in the utility across the board and also with the stakeholder. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The second element is to characterize the source water, to understand the source water better so we can make better decisions. And then based on our vision, our characterizations of the source water, we can now form these protection goals. What do we need to do in order to protect our source water? Through the goal, we can develop our action plan. These are actually source water protection plan that could be put in place that guide the activity of the utility to protect our source water. And then through the plan, we can then go through implementation. And these are now the actual work on the ground to make sure that activity is being put forth to make sure that our drinking water supply sources is indeed being protected. And then the last element is basically a periodic evaluation and revision of the program, kind of adapted management approach that things change and we gain better understanding on the hydrology, on how water flow in the system. Also, there are changes in regulation and there could be changes in land use, and all these changes can affect our source water protection plan and our program. So in that case, maybe on a regular basis, like every 5 years, we can go back and revisit the plan, and if there are a lot of changes, we'll probably will need to update that plan and also update our action program to make sure that our source water is being continued protected. One of the key things, as you can see in this slide that's in red, is the involvement of the stakeholders throughout the process, all the way from step 1 or element 1 through to element 6. So in a schematic diagram, this is what it generally looks like. We probably don't need to keep on talking about this, but you can see that the flow is indicating that this could be a really iterative process, that it's not just linear going from vision to source water characterization to program goal to the formulation of the action plan to the implementation of this action plan and then to the program evaluation. But you can also see is that to the side, there are all these feedback and revision that can happen. And if you find out your source water characterization, provide you some information, you might actually have to go back and see that the vision might have to be modified in order to accommodate that new information that you have just gathered. So the key point of the source water protection standard is that although each of these primary elements may differ greatly in their required effort or complexity, again, depending on the system that you are dealing with, these 6 elements could vary in terms of the effort that need to be made to accomplish the final goal of protecting our source water. But all these elements are vital to the success of the program. So if you skip one of them, for example, you never end up evaluating the program progress, then in that case you might be missing something, then again the program then can fail. So all these elements are essential. They are needed to make sure that they can effectively work together to protect our source water. So as I mentioned early on, this can provide you with a generalized framework to the various different individual utilities that can use this information, use this approach to establish and maintain a source water protection program that account for the unique local condition, incorporate the interests of the local stakeholder, and reflect sustainable long-term commitment to the process by all parties. So these are really sort of the key points that we can take home. So let's now go into each one of the elements, and I'm going to show you some example, and also maybe just have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about each one of these 6 elements. This first one is vision. So a vision, basically what we are looking at is a formalized vision that guides the development and implementation of a source water protection program. So we actually would like to have it written down. So a written statement is useful because people can actually look at it, and also they can add to it as time goes on. And this is really a statement of commitment by the water utility to source water protection program. And it can also be used to align priority and resources for the source water protection program. And this is also something that could be used to share with stakeholders and the general public, that they can see is that what exactly is the commitment by the water utility to protect their drinking water supply sources. So there are a couple examples I want to just share with you. One is developed by Groton Utility in Connecticut. This is in the southeastern portion of Connecticut, and it's the utility that primarily using surface water, and they brought in planner, they brought in the local landowners, and they sit down and actually go through a multi-day exercise broken up into a few months, but finally establishing a vision that they can all share. So in this case, their vision is to achieve a long-term preservation of safe and sustainable drinking water supply through proactive watershed protection in the ground utility public water supply watershed. And that is something that they all agree on, and in a time when there are some disagreement or challenge that arise because of some conversation, we all end up going back to look at the vision to see whether what is the best approach in trying to achieve this particular vision. And then in Philadelphia, we all know that Philadelphia have devoted a lot of their resources in protecting their source water, given that they really don't own their source water. The Schuylkill River that's coming down, most of the land is owned by private landowner, and there are a lot of industries and commercial development within that watershed. So Philadelphia take a different approach, and they still end up developing a vision. And their vision, it's stated, and you can see in the slide, that they would like Philadelphia to be a green city. They want clean water, and by having a green city, clean water, it unites the city with its water environment, creating a green legacy for future generations while incorporating a balance between ecology, economics, and equity. So that's their vision. Again, they're very serious about the protection of the drinking water supply sources. And from their vision, they also developed their mission statement. It's much more concrete. It's more like the action. In this case, that the mission statement stated as to preserve and enhance the health of the region's watershed through effective wastewater and stormwater services, and the adoptions of a comprehensive watershed management approach to achieve a sensible balance between cost and environmental benefit, and is based on planning and acting in partnership with other regional stakeholders. Again, you can sort of see in these statements, stakeholder plays a very important role in making sure that we all have buy-in to make sure that we can have a comprehensive program in protecting our drinking water supply sources. The second element is source water characterization. In the sense is that we really want to understand what is in our source water, how the source water come into in contact with our water supplier. So the characterization and assessment of the source water, obviously we know most water come from the land and also from subsurface area, and so these are the effort that we will put in to characterize the source water by obtaining a good understanding and good knowledge of our source water, so it can be used to develop the goals and plan to implement the action that realize the source water protection vision. So that is very important to understand the character of the source water. And also that will provide us with information and allow us to conduct a risk assessment or susceptibility analysis to see what kind of goals and objective and action plan we'll actually have to put together in order to protect our source water. And with this information, it will help us prioritize our water quality and source water protection issue, and also identify those contamination sources of significant concern. So there are a lot of tools that we can use to help in characterizing our source water. And on the right-hand side, you'll see that this is an update of a manual that put together by EPA. And it's a how-to manual to update and enhance your local source water protection assessment. So source water assessment, which was done in the early stage of the source water protection program as mandated under the Safe Drinking Water Act amendment, it's basically it's the good starting point for you to think about how to characterize your source water. And as you can see, the various different elements of characterizing our source water include delineating the source area of concern, obtaining water quality information, identify potential and actual contamination sources, conduct a land use analysis, figure out what kind of physical barrier might be there and whether they are effective or not, look at our intake structure if it's a surface water system, and then allowing us to use that information to identify gaps and to fill these gaps, and then finally use that information also to help us in determining the vulnerability or susceptibility of our source water to contamination. So there are a couple of examples. Here, this is one example. They're looking at using a geographic information system to really analyze what kind of land use pattern are we seeing within our watershed. And in this case, you can sort of see that there are multiple land use and whether these land use are compatible with our drinking water supply sources, and how do we go about to maybe mitigate the impact by these land use on our source water. And then for also using this information, and we can use more updated technologies, including geographic information system and remote sensing, then we can identify various different sources of contamination. So here, this is an example of Norfolk in Nebraska. When we look at the wellhead protection area, we can determine that this wellhead protection area is about 12 square miles, and in it we have 185 residential sites, and each of which is estimated to have one domestic well. So we know that even though we might not be looking at a public water supply well, but there will be a lot of private wells that also could be affected by these potential contamination sources. But there are also wells at 20 commercial sites, and we can see that in here we have 29 monitoring wells and also approximately 20 irrigation wells. Well, regarding to the inventory of potential and actual contamination sources, we identified there are fuel oil storage tanks, and we can identify the location and the size of these tanks, and also where people store pesticide and herbicide and how do they use it, and the location and the amount. So here, this is a area photo of this particular area that basically you can see the plat map and you can see the agricultural field, and also you can identify the various different contamination sources or potential contamination sources that are located within the wellhead protection area. So after we characterize the source water, the next step will be determining what kind of program goal. These are the goals and objectives that need to be formulated to help us figure out what kind of source water protection program is needed. So here you can see the goal is to use to guide the source water protection program and its element, to target problems through characterization and risk assessment process, and to address the driver that motivate the source water protection program, and also address current and future issue. Don't forget that there are issues that can come in to the picture, and that's really it will be the proactive approach in making sure that a contaminant would not come into contact with our wellhead protection area or our source water protection area, to ensure that the potential of contamination is minimized or eliminated. So for these program goals, again, we can't really de-emphasize the importance of stakeholders. Stakeholder is very important in both internal to the water utility, also external to the water utility. They should be involved and to help in developing the various different goals. And these goals could be general in nature, but if they are a specific issue that you want to address, they could also be in much greater detail. And they should address the water quality issue that are related to public health, treatment requirement, and cost, and also aesthetic concern that may include other considerations such as environmental stewardship and equity. They should consider area where success is most likely, because it will help us in prioritizing and get success story up front, and so in that case we can continue to develop our source water protection program. So here, these are some examples. This is coming from Philadelphia again, And the Source Water Protection Plan incorporates 7 major objectives, and it established the Schuylkill Action Network. It created a long-term sustainable fund to support the restoration, protection, and education project in the Schuylkill River watershed, and also increase awareness of the Schuylkill River watershed regional importance as a drinking water source, initiating changes in policy and decision-making to balance and integrate the priority of both the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act, and also establish an early warning system and to help share the information and reducing the point source impact on water quality, and also reducing non-point source impact to the water quality. So then moving on to the next element, which is the action plan. The action plan identifies required action. These are management practices, or maybe the modification to statute or regulation, and also maybe entering into agreement through memorandum of understanding or a memorandum of agreement that needed to mitigate existing and future threat to source water. So activity address each desired source water protection goal could be broken up into that each action item of the plan should identify what, why, where, who, how, and when. Pretty straightforward that we can identify these various different elements to establish our action plan. And it also will help in prioritizing, give us a timetable given the fact that we can't do everything at the same time, and that allow us to sequence a various different action, again, maybe relying on the prioritization scheme that we have developed. So there are also additional components for the action plan that these are things that we also need to make sure that as we are carrying out our action plan, we take these into consideration. These include the compliance with regulatory requirements. Just because we have the action plan doesn't mean that we can forget about regulatory requirement. We also will need to make sure that we have security plan and the implementation of these plans, emergency preparedness and response, and also health and safety management. Then come to the next step, which is implementation. Now, once you have an action plan, but if the action plan is not being implemented, that basically is really not taking any action. So in that case, the plan will sit on a shelf and it looks pretty, but it's really not very useful. So you can see is that just having a plan does not mean that we are implementing the source water protection program. And in order to make sure that we implement the program, we do need to have a comprehensive and implementable plan. And these could be including adopted management approach, and also, as I talked about earlier, establishing a timeline so we can actually progress through the implementation of the plan. So the implementation could establish various different milestones and benchmark, and because these will be very helpful in keeping track of the progress. And also we want to establish roles and responsibility to ensure that folks will actually be carrying on the activity. And then also by going through this, we can identify obstacles and look for different ways to overcome these obstacles. And also by having this timeline, we can then go through the identification of various different funding and how do we get additional funding to implement our plan, and then also establish a procedure for contingency planning and periodic revision for the improvement of the plan. Then the last element of the 6 element is the program evaluation. Given the fact that actually source water protection program is really a process that is going to be ongoing until basically the water system shut down. So as long as the water system is active, we're basically looking at there could be changes in the landscape, and these changes will be reflected in the water quality, which will affect how the water system will operate. So the source water protection plan is a living document. It will continue to be improved, and it's also, as I mentioned early on, it's going to be through an iterative process. So including the provision of evaluation in the source water protection plan is important. And by having that particular element in, will allow us to continue to go back and revisit the vision, the characterization of source water, the goals and objectives, the action plan, and the various different implementation elements. So in summary, the source water protection is highly site-specific. And so this process is it's going to be depending on the ecology, depending on the geology of the area, the geography, the history, and these are all going to be factored into the uniqueness of a source water protection program. But also the other key thing is that all successful source water protection program share these 6 common elements as you have just gone through with me in this particular webinar. For the rest of the slide, I want to skip over most of it. One of the testimony on the source water protection program, the G300 standard, is from Dr. Bob Morgan of Beaver Water District in Arkansas. And one of the key things that he really thinks this is very useful is that we all basically have a good idea of what source water protection program should be like. But by going through the standard and going through the guidebook, he can actually identify things that they might have forgotten or things that they didn't really have thought about and or emphasize on. And so it's almost like a good checklist for them to go through to make sure that they go all the way from the vision, going through the various different elements in terms of the source water characterization, establishing the protection goal, creating the action plan, and implementing the action plan, and then also going through the periodic revisions. So as I said, I want to leave some time for questions. But for the rest of the slide deck, hopefully maybe we can also share it with the audience. There are a sequence of worksheets in the operational guide of the G300 standard, and so this is an example of the worksheet. But what these worksheets really contain is a whole sequence of questions. Here we have basically a shot of the vision question. There are 7 key questions. I won't be able to go through all of that. And then you can see there are questions associated with characterization of source water. So they're here. We got about 12 questions. And then the program goal question, we also can see is that they are being laid out within the slide. There are altogether 9 of them. And then also the action plan question. And again, there are a couple of these worksheets that can help a water utility or any entity that's interested in developing a source water protection program. So I'm going to run through these very quickly. So action plan is a lot more, so that you can see all the way up to 14 questions. And the implementation question, these are establishing the milestones, roles and responsibility, and then the evaluation is whether there is a process allowing you to go back and take a look at whether these the various different elements that's being used to meet the objective of source water protection. So that's basically what I have. Sorry, I run over maybe a little bit, but I want to just leave some time to make sure that there are any other questions.
Okay, well, thank you, Chiho. That's very good. And yes, we do have time for questions. If you haven't submitted one already and have a question, you can submit it through the chat function on the GoToWebinar. And we do have a couple questions so far. So, Chiho, one question is from a state with many small water systems. Could you provide them an example of a small water system that has worked through the 6 elements of the G300?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. Actually, if you go back to the list of the Exam Source Water Protection Award, a few of the winners actually are small systems. And one example that I can clearly remember is a small community in Iowa that their groundwater system is being contaminated by nutrient, and both from fertilizer and also from manure. So their system really have quite high nitrate concentration. And what they end up doing is that they actually follow through with a source water protection program, because if they actually implementing a treatment approach, it will cost them probably about $1 million plus to actually put together a plan to denitrify the shallow groundwater they are using. So instead, they actually look at source water protection, and they actually get some help from the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund, get some money, get some grant from the state themselves in watershed protection, and they purchase land around their wellhead and converted that land from agricultural use to a prairie, and also involve a community group called Pheasants Forever that they planted the prairie grass seed. And over time, what they have seen is that their shallow groundwater actually starts seeing a reduction in nitrate. So what they end up doing is that, the folks together with the stakeholder, including the landowner in that area, sit down, look at what kind of vision they have, and then they identify what is the problem of the source water with some help from the state. And then they come up with, what's their goal is to try to reduce the nitrate in that shallow aquifer. And then by putting together an action plan, which involve going out, getting resources, getting money, buying up land, and then they implement that particular plan by actually purchasing the land, planting the prairie grass, and then monitoring that water quality. And over time, they can see that things are changing. And they manage then, by having that change, they can brand some water. They actually then able to serve the community with the shallow groundwater with very little treatment, instead of putting a denitrification plan in place to make that water drinkable. So they go through those 6 steps. So they actually use that approach, and they also have been a winner of one of the Samurai Source Water Protection Award.
Very good, great example, and $1 million savings, I guess.
Yep.
And that leads to another question, question on benefits. Could you elaborate further on the benefits of using the G300 standard? So.
Well, sure. I mean, for the G300, I mean, obviously we all know is that when we put together a source water protection program, the cost side is actually always easier to quantify, because we are buying up land, or we are implementing best management practices. We go out and actually maybe get some easement. These are all costs that could be easily quantifiable. The challenge, of course, is always on the benefit. Apart from the water purveyor, so in that case, a drinking water system may see that they can use less chemical for their treatment, whether it's a surface water system. So in that case, they might see less sediment because you have better sediment control in the watershed. So they can use less coagulants, and the filter is in better shape. But that's only one part of the cost. There are also other additional costs, which is harder to quantify, and sometimes what we probably need to really think about is to include all these other benefits that we're getting, but not really just dealing with the drinking water system. Because the thing about is that if we have a more preserved, a well-maintained, well-managed watershed, well, we probably will have less flooding. That means we'll have less property loss if there are any kind of stream bank erosion. We also can see is that there are other ecological services that are provided by the protected area. And and even further on, you can think about if we do have forests or vegetation that have been protected, they also serve another purpose of sequestering carbon. And so there are a lot of different benefits. The key thing is that how do we go about to actually quantify these benefits, and instead of just going solely on the economic approach, but we might be thinking about environmental and social are the two other elements that we want to use. So achieving what we would like generally call the triple bottom line, and in that case using that as a approach to deal with cost benefit analysis.
Very good. Sounds like a sustainability standard.
That's right.
So, okay, well, thank you very much. If anyone else has further questions for Chiho, his email is up on the screen. And I think Anthony had sent out a message to everyone before the webinar that this webinar and recordings of the previous 2 webinars on utility management standards are on the ESDA website in the events section, and I believe he'll be sending out probably a follow-up email to everyone who attended today's session. So thank you for attending today, and that's it.
Okay. Thank you for your time.